Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to another edition of DIY Money.
DIY money.
Where did that Oscar the Grouch come in? I don't know where that came in. I've never done that. 700 million episodes.
Usually you go like loud and
DIY money. Yeah. What's going on, Howard? How you be?
Same old, same old. I feel like I was thinking about it this morning. The people need an update on you. How's your running game?
All
How's
right.
your
Well,
life?
let's hit a couple spitfire things. Number one, running. I'm running. Everything is great. I am currently not training for anything, but we're getting the band back together. Training begins May 26th, targeting a September marathon. I'm really excited about that. I met with my buddy who I trained with for like ever last year, 8 months, and I was kind of, in the doldrums a little bit. And I told him, I said, I don't know if we'll ever be able to. It was like a relationship show. I was like, I don't know if we'll ever be able to recreate what we had last year. It was so special. And he was like, he's running the Berlin Marathon. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm running Berlin, and you have a marathon in September, because he knew I was looking at one. And I said, yeah, but you're going to run that and just, enjoy it.
But it's just not the same.
It's like, it's not the same. Like, you're just going to. He's like, no, I'm going to train hard. Game on. I was like, sweet. I was like, well, you get in the lab. And you let me know. And so 2 hours after lunch, he sent me a note, and he was like, training begins May 26th.
What does get in the lab mean?
So he is very scientific when it comes to the training program.
Okay.
What to do, when to do it, taper, the whole nine. I mean, whether it's training, whether it's nutrition, whether it's rest. So dovetail, second update. This is day, I want to say 14 or 15, I don't remember, of no caffeine. And I am
back on the train.
Yeah, I have
back off the train.
I do this periodically. I am certain I've talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm certain I've gotten off, etc. It got so bad, and I'll be a little vulnerable here. It got so bad that I was taking to sleep overnight. I was taking an over-the-counter like sleep gel pill thing, and then I'd still wake up in the middle of the night, and I'd have a little bit of the melatonin gummy by my bed, and I'd take a little bite of that to fall back asleep.
Jeez.
Then get up in the morning, and even though you sleep all night, you're not really getting restful sleep. So I'm pounding coffee all morning, right, just to get through. By 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I was toast. Dragging butt. And I was like, this has got to end. So I got off the coffee. The first 2 days were horrific. I went to go meet my son for lunch, and I got there a little bit early, 11:30, fell asleep in my car. Like, he's like knocking on my window. Dad, we going to lunch or what? I'm like, yep, my bad. I'm up. Here we go.
That's bad.
Took me 3 or 4 days to get over the hump. I have energy. I'm great. Everything. It's wonderful. The true test will be that first time that I have a really crappy night's sleep, or I'm traveling or something, and then I have an important meeting in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that will be
That's
the true
test.
test, because I'll want that extra edge, whatever. In the same vein, you asked, so here we go.
Oh, I'm ready.
In the same vein of the no caffeine, which is, just been phenomenal, and I hope I can keep it up. I'm trying desperately to improve my sleep. I've not gotten the Woot Band or the Oura Ring yet, but I'm probably going to get one of those to track, to actually get the science behind it when I log into an app or whatever. But my goal is I want 8 hours of straight sleep, and I've not been able to do it yet, but I've come very close. The last few nights I have had 1 or 2 minor wake ups. I wake up, no melatonin, nothing to get me back, and then within 10 to 15 minutes I'll fall back asleep. Last night was my best ever, and it was
new record,
right at 8 hours, and I'm going to give a 10 to 15 minute buffer. So let's call it 7:45. So look at this. 14 days with no caffeine and almost an 8 hour sleep. I'm like,
you're unstoppable.
I'm a freaking new man, Howard. I'm a new man. And I'm walking around, I'm like, is this what it feels like to be normal? This is what people feel like every day that are not on caffeine and get good sleep, because this is not me. This has not been me. And I'm fired up. And I ran this morning, and I ran well, and I ran fast. That's what you wanted. Yeah, so that's big. I think my son is committing to Auburn, too. That's a big deal.
That is a big deal. A lot of changes for Q Tatro.
Huge. Teaching in Italy this summer for 3 weeks. Cannot wait. That's going to be fire.
fucking jealous of that.
You should be.
I just learned.
I would be jealous if I were you
So
of that.
the last few years, my sleep has gotten worse. I'm sleeping through the night, but I would wake up still exhausted, and I would sleep like 9 hours. Like I would be in bed asleep for 9 hours and wake up terrible. And I was telling one of my friends this, and they're like, "Oh, well, you're probably just not sleeping well." I'm like, no, I'm sleeping through the night. Like, but what I realized was, like, I wasn't going into like as deep of sleep throughout the time. The REMs.
Yeah.
And so they told me to start taking this is a hack, and I'm gonna mess up the second word. So all the scientists at home, sorry in advance. Magnesium glycinate,
magnesium.
the one with the G. And
yeah, you don't want the citrate.
Not the citrate.
Yeah,
and I
these are
started
the-
taking that every day, and I felt so much different waking up. So
Wow.
I've been on that train for probably 6 months, and now I can sleep for 8 hours and feel way better.
Yeah.
So there's a hack for your sleep needs.
Yeah, it's so I've known this for a very long time that sleep is, I mean, it's like a performance enhancing substance. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But as I roll into the end of May and this next training block, nutrition and rest and sleep are going to be just the two big critical factors that I want to focus on in this next training block. It's very important.
There it is.
There it is.
Well, you know what else is critical?
That we get
Sending
to a
questions.
Yeah, sending questions. Yeah, so we need questions. We're getting a lot of questions, but as you can tell from the subject matter of 2025, we're trying to go back to a bit of the basics. We feel as if we've sort of left a lot of people behind, and we don't want to do that. Plus, you can tell our urgency in this environment from the standpoint of credit card, payments or delinquencies on auto loans or some of the other concerns we have. We're really trying to get back to basics. So while we have a lot of questions in the queue, we're going to hold off on some of them because they're a little bit more complex and they're a little bit more in the weeds when it comes to personal finance. And we really want to get back to the questions of budgeting, saving, psychology of money, etc. So if that is you and you have questions or you're facing something right now or you're dealing with a challenge, please hop on your phone, record an audio question, send it to us to podcast@DIYmoney.org. What you're going through right now or the question you're considering, you would be shocked at the number of people that probably have that same question, meaning you would be helping out many, many people, the thousands of people who listen to this show every single week. So please do send us those questions, and you get a $25 Amazon gift card. Like, bada bing. It's real simple. Let's go to our question today from Jen. Jen, what do you got?
DIY! Hi, DIY Money. I am a loyal listener and have listened to hundreds of podcasts and episodes over the years. I totally understand the DIY steps and have implemented many of them. I am currently working on tweaking my budget and adding additional budget lines to handle things like accruals. Based on other episodes, it sounds like the accruals is a great place to fund things like your furnace cleanings and all of those annual needs that might pop up. However, when I created a budget for that, my accrual line each year is rather large. What is the best way to handle this? While trying to build up my accrual to handle these yearly expenses, I also have accruals that are happening each month. Do I take the money from my emergency fund and fully fund my accrual budget for the year so that I can then just pay my accruals for that year out of that fund while also contributing money to it to start to build up funds for next year? It seems like the other budgetary goals are a little bit easier to contribute to and watch them grow for future expenses. But this one is a little bit different since I also have ongoing expenses coming out while I'm trying to contribute it to have the money for the next year's expenses. Any advice that you have would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for all your great financial advice and all of your fun bantering throughout the show.
I love this question. This is what I'm talking about. Jen, phenomenal question. And you're right, accruals are the thing, right? The thing that can derail even the most devoted budgeteer. So I've talked about this in the form of like starting the year. I even wrote a blog post once that was like in January. I was like, start that Christmas savings, because a lot of people, when they kind of come to this personal finance moment, and they're like, I've got to get our stuff in order, and they get a budget, and they start saving, and they find their margin and all the rest of this stuff, and then something like a Christmas, vacation, furnace cleaning, one-time fertilizer nonsense that I pay for, grub whatever in the backyard that I pay ungodly amounts for, gutter cleanings. Did I already say that? I feel like I said it twice because it happens twice. And all the pool opening, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so those things happen, and if you're not budgeting for them, they can derail the plan. I want to hit on your specific situation right now, and then I'll let Allie cover maybe the broad strokes or brush strokes of accruals. It sounds like, again, you're at the stage where you're like putting away for accruals, but as you said, there are expenses that are coming up that would be in the accrual section. Now, if you didn't have accruals, I guess my question for you would be, if these expenses are coming up, how would you pay for them? You wouldn't put them on a credit card, and I'm guessing don't have the capital for them, so they would have to come out of the emergency fund because you don't want to take steps backwards. But then it derails maybe some other budgeting items when you are saving for or you're saving for to put back into your emergency fund. So I think if it were me, what I would probably be doing is I would know what the accrual amount is on an annual basis, and they're going to happen periodically. Like I'm heavier in the very beginning of the year and the very end of the year. The beginning of the year, it seems like all the insurances are due. And at the end of the year, I have property tax, and I have a couple other big things that come due. I don't know what they are.
Christmas,
yeah. Well, that's something every month. But yes. Well, no, that's true. Yeah,
I've accrued.
Yeah, it comes at the
end. You're giving Christmas gifts in
February?
You're
right. You're spot on. Christmas. And so, I just didn't think of like a bill, though. But you're right. Okay, anyways. But I would say that if I hadn't built the accruals for the beginning part yet, I would have to use emergency fund money to pay them. I don't think I would take emergency fund money and sort of allocate it all towards accruals right now, because then you'd just be doing the same thing and then be building back up the emergency fund. I think what I would do is I would take it bill by bill. So if something, let's say you had $1,000 expense for whatever, you hadn't yet built up the accruals for that. You could use whatever you've built up for that because it's part of it. But then you would have to use the difference out of emergency fund. And then hopefully you have another area that you might be able to cut back on that are bigger picture goals down the line, house, car, whatever, and refund your emergency account. But what you want to get to the point of is you're spot on, and it's a little chicken and the egg, and it's a little dance. And I love that you're dancing because that means you're well into the DIY money steps. But getting to the point where you have the accruals sort of built up and you're able to pay them. It might be that by March, your accrual's back to zero, but you've paid the accruals that are due up until March. And then you started building it back up again, and you had another one come in July or whatever. So it might take some massaging of the accruals, if you will, but that's how I would approach it. This is the last thing I'll say. This is another reason why I like being in control via spreadsheets or Google Docs is what I use, because I have never found an app that could do this, like ever. It's just there's too many things. How could you do that? Accrual for, furnace cleaning, accrual for this. I understand. I got people out there that are probably listening that going, no, I put it in miscellaneous and it's there and blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's fine. But I like to know what I'm accruing for. And you know what else I do, Allie? I have it listed because inevitably some of these prices go up every year. So even though I've accrued for what the balance was last year, this happened this year for me. My auto insurances went up, and I immediately reached out to my guy and I was like, hey, I understand auto's going up. This has gone up 30%. Like we're going to requote some of these. And we did requote them. They went up a little bit, but they didn't go up 30%. And so that was helpful, because if I hadn't been tracking it, I would have not necessarily known. What say you, Howard?
First of all, is Budgeteer, is that a word? Did you just
It
make
is
that
now.
up? That's fire.
Did I said it?
Yeah, at the
I
beginning you were like, "You're an expert budgeteer."
I did? I don't even remember.
Come on, Quinn.
Okay, I'm going to have to go back and listen. It is a word now, and I want to make a
budgeteer.
swag.
We're gonna
we
make
need swag out of
t-shirts.
that. Budgeteering.
I'm a DIY budgeteer.
It's on. I
Come
love
on.
it.
Anyway, so I want to start by saying if you're not an advanced budgeteer, then keep in mind this is kind of like a 2.0 back to the basics step. So before you try to get fancy and have these accruals, which basically means kind of going back to the basics, you take what comes up annually that you were talking about, Quinn, furnace cleaning, Christmas. I have medical expenses in mind because those I go to the doctor and I spend $1 bajillion, but then I won't for the rest of the year. So I'm not going to budget for that monthly.
But a bajillion. I mean,
Bajillion as a
puts a
budgeteer.
dent in there.
Good luck with that. Anyway, so you take all those expenses and then on a monthly basis, you put money into either a separate account or just set it aside knowing that as far as you're concerned, that money is spent. Now, I like this question because candidly, I'm still working out how I like to do it and I've tried it a few different ways. So I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the ways I've done it and what I have found in that experience. To your point of, do I pull from emergency savings? Do I just pay that expense and call it a wash for that month? How do I do it? What I used to do was I opened a separate checking account at the bank, and I was like, okay, no problem. Once a month, I'm going to move my accrual amount from my checking that I use everything out of into this escrow account. I called it accrual account. And then when those expenses come up, I'll just use that debit card or tie it to my credit card and pay it from that account, and then it'll be perfect because it's all set aside and I'll call it spent. But I hit the exact thing that she's talking about where I got so annoyed because I would put in like $300 into this account and then I would have an expense that was $350 and I'm like, okay, well now I got to pay $300 out of this account, $50 out of this account, and it just got so complicated. So what I landed on, and maybe this is helpful and maybe it's not, it's probably a personality thing, but I looked through my expenses and to Quint's point tried to figure out when in the year do these actually happen and what's the month that's going to be the most expensive. And what I did is I just mentally added that buffer to my checking account so I can take care of that if it comes up. And then I created a separate spreadsheet where I have those annual expenses. So this isn't an arbitrary figure. I know my exact accrual amount. Actually, I was just working on this the last few weeks because we reset in March here. So I was able to do that. But as I look through my annual expenses, I have, okay, what is of my escrow, my accrual amount? What is for Christmas? What is for medical? What is for auto when I know I'm going to go get an oil change and they're going to tell me every filter I've ever thought about needs replaced? And I'm like, I'm going to strangle you. So anyway,
I'm a budgeteer.
I'm a budgeteer. Come on, it's not in the budget. So all of those have a specific line item, but then on that monthly expense, I just have one line item. That's my escrow is what I call it, accrual amount that adds up to that, and I'm tracking the yearly expenses. So it can be a little bit of a pain. The other thing I've considered doing, which I might try if I try this for a year and hate it is instead putting that buffer amount in the account at the beginning of the year. And that way you should be able to monthly cash flow.
And when you say buffer amount, you're just meaning the overage, like if it's not a monthly amount, like that 300, 350, the buffer would be 50.
Mm-hmm. Right. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking through, and this is how I'll probably end up doing it, but like let's say I look through all my expenses for the year. I think the most expensive month may be a $2,000 month where I have some things come due, whatever. So I would put $2,000 in that account as that like buffer, and that way as I put money in each month, it should cover the expenses.
Yeah, and what should also happen is in your situation, Jen, is if you let's say you were putting $300 a month away for accruals, or maybe a lot more, I don't know, but let's just use that number, and you're 3 months in, and so that's $900, and your first big accrual comes out, which is $1,000. So what Allie's saying is the buffer would be $1,000. So you use the 900 and you pull 100 from emergency. Now, theoretically, you would say, okay, I'm 100 down in my emergency, so I need to, be funding that back by reducing an expense somewhere else. But But the reality is that it should smooth out over time. So if you're still putting the $300 a month into your, I use a savings account. I do exactly what you used to do. So I move it over into a savings account. But if you're putting that over there, by the end of the year, or maybe even the next 6-7 months, you should be $100 to the good. Unless you have these repeating, heavily, margined, if you will, accrued expenses until it works out. My point is that you could even that out by the end of the year.
Right.
Right.
Because there should be months that you put in $300, but you only had $50.
Right.
Of
At
your
which
accrual.
point you could then move the $100 back over to the emergency fund. We see this in accounting a lot when you're looking at budgets per se. For example, I sit on a finance committee of an organization, and we have a lot of front-loaded expenses, and we have a cash buffer for this. But what happens is, we'll sit in a meeting and they'll look, and it's like budgeted year to date versus actual, and it's totally out of whack. And so the finance director will have to say, well, it's totally out of whack because we have all of these expenses in the very beginning of the year, and then at the throughout the rest of the year we have none. And that happens in many, many line items on the particular budget that we're looking at. So it's not uncommon. It's a little difficult within an individual situation, but it sounds like, Jen, you're on the right path. I love the way you're thinking. I don't necessarily like the pre-funding of it, but again, I don't know the dollar amounts. I don't know the values. So if that's just helpful, try it. I mean,
Right.
try it, but you got to build that emergency fund back up.
Oh, absolutely.
No question about it.
And the key, too, is I'll have a running total of how much have I put in, which is my monthly accrual times however many months it's been, and then I can tell you any day how much of that I have already spent. So you can know if you're in a deficit or if you have extra money. And as far as I'm concerned, I'll mentally, if that number's $1,200 that should be set aside for future expenses, then mentally $1,200 in my checking is just already spent.
There you go. Great one. Excellent, Jen. We'll send you a $25 Amazon gift card. Thanks so much for sending that question in. Please do keep sending those questions in. We need them. We want to keep them basic because there's a lot of people who need the basics out there. Remember, friends, the secret to wealth is pretty simple. Live on less than you make. Invest the rest. And do so for a very, very long time. Make it a great one.